In this vector graphics tutorial, we're going to look at the use of transformations on simple shapes, and then use transform again to repeat a transformation to see what kind of patterns we can build up. Here are some examples of patterns that have been created using transform again. We're going to start off with a simple shape such as a star, and we're going to have a look at how we can change that using the transform menu. So in Illustrator, I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to open up a landscape A4 page. I always like to work with the side panels popped out so that we can choose colours and gradients and so on. And we're now ready to actually start on our transformations. So I'm going to start with a simple shape such as the star. I'm going to start to draw a star, and notice that it can be spinning around at any kind of angle. If I hold the Shift key down, it makes it a perfect star with it sitting on its feet and pointing straight up the way. I'm now going to go to the Object menu and choose Transform. Now with Transform we can do things like moving or rotating or reflecting or scaling. But if we use Transform Each, we get access to all of these at the same time. I'm going to switch on Preview so that we can see the effect. If I was to do a move, we can see that the star has moved from its position. Flicking between Preview on and off, we can see the difference that has made. At the same time, I could also scale so that it has got bigger in one particular direction there. If I match these up, 118 and 118, then it would grow by the same amount. So again, with the preview on and off, it's got bigger and it's moved. We can also give it a little bit of rotation. And if I put all these things together, I could move from my starting star to a new position. One trick that we can use though, instead of just moving and transforming it, we can make a copy of it. So I'm going to try copy. And you'll see that now what I can then do is to use Object, Transform, and then Transform again. Transform again is Control plus D. So on the keyboard it's much easier to get that happening. And now Control D several times builds up a bit of a pattern. Hard to see what's going on here because each of these shapes is filled with white. So if I was to highlight everything and then give it no fill, we'd get a better idea of what is going on there. So by including all of the transforms there, I've got a little bit of a mess. So I'm going to undo that back to my original star. Make sure that it is see-through. And then I'm going to go Object, Transform, Transform Each. And I'm going to reset each of these. I don't want any movement. I could maybe have a little bit of scaling and rotation. Maybe not quite as much as 110, so I'll take it down to something like 107. And then remember to click on Copy instead of OK. So Copy, does that, and then Control D creates an interesting pattern sort of zooming out from infinity. If we go back and have a look at some of our other options, we could create the classic spirograph using an ellipse and just rotations. So I'm going to start here with an ellipse. I'm going to go to Object, Transform, and Transform Each. I'm going to have no scaling this time, so my scale will be 100%. Possibly easier just to type that. 100 and 100 is exactly the same size, no movement. And then what I can do is I can choose just to type something in here, 360 divided by how many transformations do I want. I can make it a prime number, something like 11. And if I switch between standard and preview, we can see how much that's going to move it, 32.727 degrees. Click on copy, and then if I make enough copies of that, Control and D on the keyboard, it will then start to repeat over itself. And we have a kind of flowerish kind of shape there. And the last of the patterns that we have here is a little bit of movement and rotation. So moving in just one of the axes. So I'm going to start off with something like a rounded rectangle. Maybe make it quite tall and thin. When I go to transform each, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a little bit of a spin backwards, maybe about 14-15 degrees. And then I'm going to move it horizontally by a noticeable amount. I actually want this to be an exact number. Maybe if I go 330 here, and then just see what that looks like. Remember to copy rather than say OK. And then Control D makes for some kind of interesting border-like pattern that could be built up. That could go around a page to give it a bit of visual interest. Okay, so apart from making patterns, what can we do with this? I'm going to select everything and delete. And one of the things we can do is to try and make some particular shapes. So what I'm going to have a look at here is starting with a star shape. Actually, I'm going to start with a circle. So I want to have a circle that is going to be a reasonable amount of the page, maybe about that much there. So I'm holding the Shift key down to make a perfect circle. And I'm going to put one star at the top here. So I'm going to go to this anchor and I'm going to draw my star from that point. So you can see it draws from the center out the way. I could use the Shift key to make sure it's pointing straight up the way. And I'm going to fill that star with yellow. Now the EU flag, and Britain used to be part of the EU before Brexit, so the EU flag is 13 stars around in a circle. So what I'm going to try and do is move one star around the circle by a fixed angle. Now to do that, I'm going to have to use the rotate tool. So I'm going to choose rotate tool here, just below the eraser tool. And if I was just to click with the erase tool, the rotate tool at the center here, so if I was to click here, it would set a starting point there. If I now go to Control D, you'll see that is spinning off to the side. Not really what we want. What I need to do when I choose the rotate tool here is use the Alt key. So what we're looking to do here is to use the rotate angle option, give it an exact angle to rotate by, and then that transformation will use Control D to repeat the action. So what we're going to do then, I'm just going to switch to selection tool, make sure that I've got this star selected. Then I'm going to use the rotate tool, and I'm going to hold down my Alt key on the keyboard, move over the center of the circle, and do a click. And you can see that the rotate dialog comes up here. And what I want is 360 divided by 13. And if I preview that, you can see that instead of just rotating in place, it is now moving around the center of the circle. Remember, of course, we don't want to just say OK, we want to copy that. And now, Control D will transform again, and we can do that enough times to make our 13 stars. So we've got the basis of the European Union flag here. To finish that off, what we'd have to do is to remove this circle, because that's not part of the actual design. We would then take a rectangle. So if I go to the shape tool here and put a rectangle around, and I'm going to just put a rectangle about there. I've not done it exactly, but that's good enough. And that rectangle should be filled with a pale blue. Now, of course, that's now hidden the stars behind it. So I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, and Send to Back. Okay, so there is our flag. But we can do a little bit better than just showing a plain flag like that. What I can do is I can select everything. So I highlight everything and go to Object Group, so that now it is turned into a flag object, and we can see that if I shift drag the side in there, it makes the whole flag smaller. And I can now go to Effect and Warp. And what Warp does is it takes a shape and it kind of bends it into different shapes. And conveniently, one of the options here is flag. So I can switch on preview. Obviously that's a ridiculous amount of bending. So if I take it down to maybe sort of 14, 15 degrees, something like that, you can see that the stars are kind of fluttering with the material of the flag rather than just being a circle. So we have managed to create a convincing flag using transform again and then a flag warping effect. Just to finish off here, what I would suggest is that you practice using this transform around a circle, around the center point, maybe to make something like a clock face. Use a text tool to put one text box, and then transform again to put 12 versions of that around in a circle.